Game threes of the NBA playoffs went underway last night, and you can't help but be impressed by two specific teams' performances in a statement win on the road. The New York Knicks triumph over the Detroit Pistons to take a big 2-1 series lead, 118 to 116, with a much improved performance from Karl Anthony Towns and another clutch performance in the fourth from Jalen Brunson. Meanwhile, out in the West, the Thunder come back from a 29-point deficit to prove why they are certainly NBA Finals contenders with a fantastic performance from all of their core stars. Most importantly, it truly speaks the tenor of these certain specific matchups where the Knicks and the Pistons are certainly going to come and be physical against each other, and where the Thunder and Grizzlies certainly did not seem like the Grizzlies could have had a chance in any of these games, but it certainly goes to show that they can still be competitive. But we're going to talk about that Ja Morant injury as we talk about the game and how the Thunder came back and completely and utterly took control of this series and most certainly are set for a sweep. But I want to start off with this Knicks game because it is a big momentum swing here, and it's a win that the Knicks desperately needed to prove that they still have the grit and toughness of the Knicks teams of recent years. But the big player in question here was Karl Anthony Towns. A lot of pundits and analysts alike wanted him to be a lot more physical in this specific game, and he certainly was. From the get go, he scored 11 of his 31 points in the first quarter and proved whether he's attacking from the rim or stretching the field by shooting the three and being, as he said, the best shooting big man in the NBA. He was electric last night, and he could do no wrong. And I really like that. I believe it was midway through the first quarter or second quarter when they got into a little bit of a scuffle, him and some other Knicks as well. That kind of set the tone for the aggression that they want to bring. Even though the Pistons, to me, feel like the tougher team in this series, just based on their physicality, based on their youth, I just feel like that's the tone. And that cat immediately from that point onwards said, I'm not going to let my team lose this game. And he did not. And then let's talk about Jalen Brunson. When the Knicks needed him most, when the Pistons were coming back into this game late in the fourth, he closed this one out. He had 12 of his 30 points in the fourth, and the Knicks were able to close this out after making it look a lot closer than it should have been late. But I had to speak about Town specifically because he certainly stepped up his game both in and around the rim and beyond the arc. Shot 4 of 8 after combining to shoot 1 of 5 over the first two games. And really incredible performance. On the other side of things, Detroit still had a pretty decent game. Cade Cunningham had 24 points and 11 assists, but the glaring statistic was that he missed 15 of his 25 shot attempts. Tim Hardaway Jr. had an incredible game, and he needs to keep this up if they want to stay in this series at a career high, at least in the playoffs, of 7 3-pointers. And Dennis Schroeder continued his series very well with 18 points, and Jalen Duren had 16 points. But I feel like the flow of this game speaks to how these two teams play. It was a very physical, tough first quarter that could have seen the Pistons go into the second quarter with a lead, but Brunson and Towns certainly paced them and were the difference in that first quarter, and that's why they led 33 to 27. And then I feel like during the second quarter they were able to pull away, and that's why they had such a big halftime lead at the break. The third quarter was a little bit more even, and then obviously the fourth quarter relied on momentum swings a lot. The Pistons came back into it. Brunson got the Knicks going. Pistons nearly could have won this game, but Brunson made his key free throws and kept the Knicks' noses ahead of the Pistons for the time being. But ultimately, what's most important that is a win for the Knicks in this series, and that they didn't let this game slip, and they certainly go into tomorrow's game feeling a lot more confident about their standing in this series, because had they lost, the question certainly would have started to arise even more. Where has this Knicks team's toughness gone? Obviously, you invested a lot in Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges to better kind of space the floor, create more offensively, but at what cost was the question for a lot of Knicks fans, because Hartenstein, DiVincenzo were certainly role players who spoke to the grit that this team exhibited last year in their playoff run. And that's largely what a lot of Knicks fans believe have been missing in this iteration of the squad. So this win certainly was not as comfortable as it should have been, but it certainly gives Knicks fans a little bit of relief, and these Knicks players as well a little bit of leeway as well in this series to better themselves for tomorrow's game to take a commanding 3-1 series lead and make the case that this team still can make deep runs in the Eastern Conference. Now let's head over to the Western Conference where history was made. The Thunder, how about them? Coming back from a 29-point deficit against the surprising Grizzlies, and just going to show how this Thunder core are spectacular in terms of how they play together. Whenever you can get three or more players scoring 20 plus points a night, that is the championship core and mindset of a team. And the Thunder really believe that they are ready to break through and be true finals contenders this year. And this performance proved it. Yes, I was semi surprised to see that the Grizzlies got out to a big lead in the first place because they looked dead and buried over the first two games. I did not expect this game to be as competitive, even without Ja Morant, as he got injured late in this game on another scary fall. Speaking of Ja Morant injuries and scary falls, another scary fall in this season's playoffs, potentially going to show you how physical these teams are becoming. Kind of going back to the better days of basketball, perhaps, with this 90s style physicality. But hey, ratings are up around the league, so even when players are getting injured, I guess there are certain positives to take away if you're the NBA, but you never want to say that. And we do hope that both Jimmy Butler and Ja Morant get well soon. But this game, man, I feel like is not necessarily the statement you would want the Thunder to make, as they still had to come back, but this goes to show that the Thunder team have been in so many different situations all year long and have answered the call multiple times. And they're continuing to do that in the postseason. It's the reason why, for a lot of people, they are the favorites to win the NBA championship this year. Chet Holmgren had all but one of his 24 points in the second half. He's coming back into form after recovering from an injury last season, and he can definitely be the X factor for the OKC Thunder down low, and in terms of his physicality, in terms of his ability to get to the rim as a 7-footer. And Shea had another magnificent game, had 31 points. Jalen Williams, 26. But I just think that OKC is setting the barometer for never backing down, reacting to adversity thrown their way. So that is why this Thunder team have been so impressive. As for the Grizzlies, this is potentially the best effort they could have given in terms of having such a big halftime lead, staying in this game for as long as they did, but you can't give up this 29-point deficit. You simply can't if you're wanting to try and stay in this series against this very dominant OKC team. And yes, you can point to the Ja Morant injury as kind of where things turned around. And now it's definitely going to be tough to even try and compete against the Thunder team as they're up 3-0 and looking to close this out, and you're without your best player. But this was ultimately the game where Memphis could at least have a little bit of hope and optimism. And now all of that is gone, along with Ja Morant and his status for this postseason. But a lot of positives potentially to take away from this game for them. They had Scottie Pippen Jr. scoring 28 points, too short of his career high. Jaren Jackson Jr. 22 points. But I just think that when Morant went down towards the end of the second is where a lot of the momentum switched, and that's where you kind of felt all the air being let out of the Memphis balloon. But ultimately, when I look at this series, and when I look at how the Thunder had a dominant performance in game one, beating Memphis by 50 points. Now to this game, where they come back from down 29, you have a team that have two highly incomparable games. One where they completely demolish a team, the other where they're down big and they gain momentum and come back. What does that say of the OKC Thunder? It says that teams are going to have to give them their best shot, and even that might not matter. Because the Grizzlies gave their best shot. Yes, potentially the injury to Ja Morant kind of allowed the Thunder to get back into this game a little bit more easily, but still, you can't have any excuses against this Thunder team. And I think that's the case with Memphis. They have a little bit too much excuses to point at. And because of that, they're down 3-0 in the series when they could have been at 2-1 with a chance to come back. Maybe, make this gentleman's sweep because the Morant injury did happen, and now that's your best player gone, and chances were, even at 2-1, you probably weren't coming back. But you at least wanted to feel good against the Thunder team. But that's what the Thunder do to you. They don't make you feel good at all. Even when they had their backs up against the wall, they don't make you feel good because of the talent they have, the depth they have in this team that makes them such a favorite for the NBA Finals. But most importantly, these two game threes stand out as tone setters for the NBA. And what I mean by that is the NBA ultimately relies now more than ever on its postseason to carry the weight in terms of revenue, in terms of TV ratings, in terms of getting people to NBA arenas and filling the seats. These two games, if they're anything to go by in terms of how the tenor of certain series will go, certainly are a net positive for the NBA. They should be feeling very good about how these playoffs have gone. Even with the Thunder up 3-0, their big favorite to win the NBA championship. It still was a competitive game, and the Thunder still made history. And the Knicks Pistons side of things, these are two classic, passionate teams, passionate fan bases going at it, getting physical, taking you back to a 90s era where that was the norm. So, if you are a fan of the NBA and you watch this sport all year long and you get to the playoffs, chances are you're feeling very happy because it shows the devotion of certain NBA fans compared to armchair NBA fans like myself who kind of just tune in for the playoffs because that's when all the excitement amps up, and that's when, most importantly, it kind of feels like the players are actually in it for something. But when you're a league like the NBA, chances are this is when you want a lot of your casual fans to tune in. The storylines, the hype, the physicality, the momentum swings all of that comes into play. If you're a casual NBA fan, all that goes out the window when you sit down and allow yourself to be consumed by a game. And these two games certainly set the tone for anyone who is doubting the NBA in terms of its ability to have good ratings. That's all I have to say on these two games and a matter of how the NBA has performed in terms of ratings over the past couple of weeks as the playoffs have started. But that will just about do it for this edition of Sporting Views. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to keep you up to date with even more NBA action. Hopefully, we get to the NHL and want to get a little bit deeper into the postseason and get a lot more narratives as series conclude in round one. Obviously, we're going to get into Champions League a little bit next week. We're going to get into FA Cup perhaps next week. A lot of implications for some English teams there. So, exciting month of April comes to a close, but May definitely brings a lot of excitement as well. But hopefully, you continue to enjoy these segments. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you very soon.